that I've seen, the reactions that I've seen are insane. Boots doesn't duck anybody. He never has, never will. Bozy, that's not the kind of fighter that he trains. It's not the kind of son that he raised. There is not an ounce of hesitation in Boots in fighting, Ortiz, Crawford, anybody at 47, anybody at 50. I think what there is a lot of people covering their ass. And I think there are a lot of people who maybe spoke prematurely about fights getting made, fights getting done, maybe weren't on the same page with their fighter, and now people are sort of covering their ass in terms of why a deal didn't make and pointing fingers. And, I hate to see it, because at the end of the day, something happened in miscommunication, and a lot of people are pointing the finger at Boots, and I think it's unfair. Boots wasn't in the room making deals. Boots isn't the one who sort of, is out there, speaking for himself in terms of what fights are going to happen and what deals are getting made. You've seen his posts. You're probably going to hear more from him directly, because clearly he didn't like what was being said about him and about his business dealings. So I think, look, Boots himself has said, 54, 47, anybody can get it. And the reality is, if something doesn't make sense, the most simple explanation is, you're probably not getting the full story. I don't think it's as simple as Boots was insisting that Ortiz go to a weight that was unrealistic. That's somebody covering their ass, for that. I don't believe it. It's not consistent with what I know of the deal and what's going on around the scenes.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, members of the Roll the Tape film crew, those were the words of Stephen Espinoza. He knows Boots, and he also knows Bozy extremely well. Of course, they've always had a good professional business relationship. I mean, we know that before Boots signed with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Promotions, he was in business with Showtime directly through the network, which is totally not uncommon in the business of boxing. And that was hanging in the balance with the untimely death of his former representation of Cameron Duncan. Needless to say, you just heard the words of Stephen Espinoza. And Stephen Espinoza basically called it right, in my opinion, knowing the business of boxing, that obviously there was a miscommunication. Boots did not duck Virgil Ortiz. Boots won't duck Virgil Ortiz. And Boots never ducked anyone. And I said it live on the Roll the Tape podcast. I said it on other platforms such as Greg Hackett's platform, and I'm going to say it again right now. When Terrence Crawford had one belt, remember he was the WBO welterweight champion of the world. Y'all remember that? Okay. When he had one title, one belt, and he wanted to pursue his goal to be undisputed in the welterweight division, there was no pressure on him from members of the media for him to move up in weight to fight a different opponent in a bigger weight class in another country to be on the undercard and not for a title in the competition. Neither did the members of the media apply that same pressure on Errol Spence when Errol Spence captured the IBF title. He only had one belt after he fought Kell Brook and won. Y'all remember that? And people were not clamoring for Errol Spence to be pressured to go up to the 154-pound division and compete in another country on an undercard for a non-title bout. But all of a sudden, these same people and fans alike are applying pressure on Boots to do something that no other welterweight has done in the sport of boxing at the short period of time that is being required. I'm not saying no other boxer moved up from 47 and then came back down to compete as a champion, because we know that that's what Kell Brook did when he moved up to fight Triple G. We seen what happened to him in that fight. And the result also was his eye socket was broke in one eye. Then he came back down to 147 pounds because he was the champion there now. And he was in a dog fight with Errol Spence. And the result of that fight was his other eye. Got his eye socket broke. And of course, we know what his career looked like subsequently following those decisions. What I am saying, though, when it comes to Boots, in the short period of time, the expectation is for him to go up to 154, fight Virgil Ortiz on an undercard in another country against a guy who doesn't hold the title. And while he literally just fought within a time span of 4 months, back to back within 4 months in his hometown. So let me get this straight. People have been complaining that fighters only compete once a year. Because they, most of them heard it from Rick Glaser. They listening to him. But fighters only fighting once a year. But Boots fought twice within 4 months. And to some people, that's still not good enough. They still wanted him to go in there after he was just in a dogfight against Karen in November last month. And then within a matter of 3 months, fight in another dogfight at 54 against Virgil Ortiz. And so, according to Stephen Espinoza and his perspective, is that people were covering their behinds. And if you read between the lines, he's actually talking about both promoters, Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya. He's talking about Eddie Hearn covering his behind because he spoke too fast in different interviews and he did not confer with Boots during the time that he was negotiating with Eric Gomez, who was operating on behalf of Golden Boy Promotions. And that's not uncommon in the sport or the business of boxing. Let me just let you know that. It's not uncommon for us as boxing managers or promoters to communicate and negotiate just in the preliminary conversations, just to ascertain, just to evaluate, just to do due diligence before going back to the fighter and providing the fighter with accurate details. before the fighter can make a decision. But what happened was members of the media and reporters were asking Eddie Hearn based on what Eric Gomez had publicized on Dan Raphael's podcast. So now Eddie had to succumb to the line of questioning, and that's when I believe he spoke a little bit too fast without conferring with Boots, which is why Boots even came out and he publicly stated through social media, from now on, if you don't hear it directly from him, then don't believe it. And then, of course, I believe that Stephen Espinoza's other indirect perspective of people covering their behinds was even on Golden Boy's part with Oscar De La Hoya, Eric Gomez, because he said he believed it's a weight that maybe Virgil Ortiz could have made at 147. He didn't say the time frame of like now or later or later time, but the bottom line is this: Virgil Ortiz is 154. He's fighting Israel Madrimov on February the 22nd in Saudi Arabia. So there you have it. Even though, what's that guy named Zaynez? I forgot how to pronounce his last name. He said they gave him 1 hour to decide on fighting Ortiz. He said he only needed 1 minute. But he said all of that, and guess what? He still didn't get the fight. Madrimov got it. You see? So apparently, Boots was going to be the B-side, according to how the whole card is set up. And of course, that's not where Boots is in his career. He's not on B-side level anymore. He's not. And I say anymore based on the story that promoters tell in the promotion. I'm not talking about him fighting someone else who was A-side and he's not. When I say B-side, I'm not talking about on the actual card. Hear me out, because I know somebody's going to misinterpret that and take that and run with it. I'm talking about as far as promotion is concerned, B-side. But the bottom line is this. We know that Boots didn't duck Ortiz. And I'm going to give you this and I'm going to let y'all go. Most people, members of the media, and I'm including content creators when I say members of the media, fans of boxing, whoever said, right, that Boots ducked Ortiz, I have a question on that for you. Do you believe that Boots underperformed in his last performance with Karen? I'm just asking a question. I'm not here to debate. I just want to ask a question. Because if your answer is yes, that you believe that Boots underperformed against Karen and there was a lack of performance and it was lackluster in his performance with Karen, that means that you have high expectations for Boots based on the talent and based on everything else you know about Boots with his skill set, right? So if you have an expectation level that is very high for Boots based on his skill set and based on his talent and everything else you know about Boots, then why would he duck somebody like Virgil Ortiz that he can actually beat, in your opinion? We need answers.